Husker fans, it's the Pick Six podcast on Zoom. It's a snow day here in Omaha. The roads are wintry, icy. It's wintry weather, and I am in the World-Herald, but Tom's in the Pennant Cave, and then Dirk is Dirk's wherever Dirk's at. He is where he's at. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Sam, I think it says something about our dedication when you live in Lincoln and you made it to the Omaha office. Tom and I live in Omaha and we did not make it to the Omaha office.
Well, it's the interstate the whole way. Out there in West O, you never know who's going to pave what. There's probably a couple of roads out there with a foot of snow on them. Out there in the wilds of West O, land of milk and honey. As my former defensive coordinator at Miller North High School used to say, we live in the land of milk and honey. Literally the biblically chosen land of West O. He was great. He's still there. He's awesome.
So, Sam, this would be a good time for any sort of Fred Patito memories, I think. But I wrote a.
He wasn't the one who said that, but yeah, I think he probably would have signed off on it.
I wrote a profile of Patito in 2003. And a lot of the story was about how even in 2003 he was still hitchhiking, like lots of places.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any memories of Fred Patito hitchhiking?
We don't need to. I don't. No, I don't have any memories of that. I have lots of fond memories of him as a coach. I don't know that he has that many fond memories of me. He's kind of a locker room lawyer, but I'm eating a nut here. Yeah,
I love that he was. That he was.
The one thing I will always say, one thing I'll say about him is he always had a play in his back pocket. And I think you wrote about a game he had one time where they ran a double reverse on a 2-point conversion or whatever. He always had a play, and you never quite knew when it was going to come out. But and it was always really well conceived and designed, and the thing he would always tell us. It was the thing I remember the most is a person should know who's playing before you walk in the stadium because they can hear you from the parking lot, how hard you hit. That was the best thing he would always tell us. And it was true. Like if you play like that and they can hear you from the parking lot, you're probably going to win. So he's a good coach. I've got other colorful stories, but we don't need to go on and on about it. But no, he's, and he lived in that weight room. That's where I'll tell you this much. That's where good football teams, generally speaking, that's where they live. They live in weight rooms. And I wasn't a weight guy, but really good teams live there. And that's just a culture. They're around it all the time. They don't want to leave. Good teams don't want to leave the weight room. They don't really want to leave the building. Even if they don't have to be there, they don't really want to leave. They want to be around the program. They want to be around ball. And this is where I can tie this into Matt Rhule. You're going to see how I'm going to turn this around the corner here. We're coming around the bend, and we're not going to slip on the winter ice. That's Matt Rhule. Like, he lives it. You can tell. You can tell that once he decides that he's going to go, dive in, he dives all the way in. And we've talked about this. Like, that's something that we thought Scott would do, but he didn't necessarily do. But that is what Matt Rhule does. And you can see it by the way that they're recruiting and by the amount of work that they put into just doing just about everything, how hard they're working to try to put together a competent, and I do mean just competent roster for next year, because they lost Ernest Hausman to Michigan today. There's a chance they could lose some other guys. It's not their fault that the roster is what it is, but they're going to have to upgrade a lot just to get it to a place where they could win 5, 6, 7 games next season. Because right now, there's a lot of question marks, and I think they're working pretty hard to try to at least answer a few of them.
I realize you have an agenda here, and obviously we want to follow your lead. But to me, what stands out about Rhule is, he really takes. I don't know if it's ego, if it's just supreme confidence, but boy, he sure takes this. Recruiting, the hidden gems thing. He sure takes that seriously. I mean, he's I think 5 years from now, if this works out, one thing that we're going to be writing about is is, the first scholarship recruit was a kid who didn't have an FBS offer, but who ran a 10-200. It's like he really believes in that stuff, and he's got the confidence to keep chasing guys even when they're not chased by anybody else. It's really interesting.
So I'm writing a story about, just traits of Matt Rhule programs for today. You're keeping me from writing it, by the way. So I went back to a press conference he did right after they clinched their Big 12 title berth. They didn't win the Big 12 title. They lost to Oklahoma. But the point I'm making here is that they just beat Texas. They beat a Tom Herman Texas team with Sam Ehlinger and all that. And they beat them 24-10. And about midway through the press conference, I don't know how it comes up, but he's like, how did you guys get here? And he starts talking about the players. And he's like, well, this is all about the players and this and this. But then he goes, sometimes people will talk about, and then he stops. And he goes, I'll just say this. We know what we're doing in recruiting. We find good players. We get a lot of good players. Recruiting is not about rankings. Recruiting is not what people say it is. Recruiting is finding people who can play, putting them in the right positions and developing. He is confident. Like he does not need to go and get a top 10 class. In his own mind, he does not need to get a top 10 class in order to field the top 10 team. He is very, very confident.
So I'm sure Shatel's thinking the same thing I am right now. That there are shades of Tom Osborne in that comment. Not so much the expression of confidence or even bragging about it, but just sort of I don't care what anybody else thinks of this player. This is what I think. I guess my concern would be, when you're arriving at a new program and you probably haven't been doing a lot of due diligence on some of these guys, are you just throwing stuff at the wall and sort of being a contrarian, or, is there a little bit of Micah Kreikmeyer in this, just to sort of, drum up attention, or do they actually believe in these guys? That would be my concern right now.
What I want to see is, first of all, I want to see anything. I want to see something. I mean, all this stuff sounds good, and I love what he's saying, but I'm at the point now where I just want to see something before I buy into it. So, but I'm wondering, because I've seen this in college basketball now. The FCS level guys moving up to the high level Division I, and they fit into a culture, they fit into a team, and they can play. And I wonder how if there's FCS football players that might end up at Nebraska in the next few years, who kind of fell through the cracks, who maybe weren't developed, rather than all the guys with stars. Maybe Nebraska ends up with a bunch of those guys on the team.
I think that sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I think generally speaking, and this is, I'm not saying this is a unique opinion, but I think generally speaking, there's probably 50 guys in a class, in a recruiting class, that are sort of jump off the page no-brainers. And then once you get past 50 or 100, Sam, I don't know where you want to draw the line, but I think it's all about fit and development and system and scheme and, vision and position and all these things. Like, I don't know if you took the starting linebacker at North Dakota State and the starting linebacker at Kansas State or Iowa or whatever, I'm not sure there's much discernible difference between those guys. I think, like I said, I think once you get past the 5 stars and maybe half of the 4 stars, I think it's all about all that intangible stuff. And I think Rhule seems to understand that, and probably believe in it more than most coaches do even.
So I couldn't agree with you more. I have what I call bands, bandings. And so the band that I start with is top 100, because in my opinion, the recruiting services actually curate that list pretty damn tight. Like there isn't a guy that cracks into the top 100 that would be like, oh, okay. Like there's not that. And sometimes, you see how recruiting services might grade a guy. Bryce Turner goes from, he has no offers from even an FBS team to a high 3-star, to a guy that's rated higher than Ben Bramer. Well, there's no science to that. I mean, come on. I mean, the guy was a 0-star on December 1st, and now he's a high 3-star because Nebraska and Matt Rhule saw something in him. Whether that's true, whether Bryce Turner's a good player or not, he very well may be. Nothing changed about him as a player in those 15 days. And so sometimes people will look at recruiting rankings and they've been told over and over again, recruiting rankings matter, recruiting rankings matter. Well, hell yeah, they do. When you have one of the top 6 classes, they do. But you start getting into the difference between the number 3 class and the number 12 class is vast. And the difference between the number 3 class and the number 12 class and the number 18 class isn't as big. And the difference between number 20 and number 43 is smaller than the difference between 3 and 12. And so the challenge is, it really is about the top 100 players. And then I have a band that goes 101 to 500. And then I have like a 501 to 1,000. And then I have these guys that are just, walk-ons, basically, who might play or might not play. And so, like, that's kind of the thing that I try to look at. And I do think that and I'm not trying to knock recruiting services. They do their best. But there's just nothing quite like the number 299th player in the country being a 4-star and the number 317th player being a 3. There's no difference between those players. It's just a randomly assigned, you get a 3 and you get a 4. Like, there's not a 20% difference between those players. And so I think that's one of the things that's worth examining. I think Nebraska knows that they're not going to get, a lot of the kids, they're at the 5-star limit right now. And there is a certain entitlement that comes to getting a high 4-star. Their expectation level is higher. And sometimes you can go get a mid 3 or even a low 3. And that kid doesn't have any illusions about what he's coming in to do. He's coming in to be a better football player. He's not coming in to start. And I think that's something that Nebraska used to be really good at identifying. And I think they lost their way. They lost their way under Mike Riley to some degree. And then they continued to lose their way under Scott.
Yeah, I think I still believe, I realize we're in an era where kids are at 17 years old are better than they've ever been. They're doing more stuff in the off season. They got personal trainers, weight training. I mean, it's all enhanced dramatically from 20 years ago, 40 years ago. But I still believe, strongly that there's a big difference between a 17-year-old kid and a 21-year-old kid. And, that's on the colleges to develop those guys, and so I really appreciate coaches who emphasize that development and who sort of take pride in it. And I realize there's sort of a maybe a contrarian streak where you're trying to be the smartest guy in the room and find the guy that nobody else has found. And I'm sure that there's drawbacks to that approach, but I would sure rather have a coach who is sort of trying to take guys who are unfinished products and round them into form, as opposed to just thinking that, hey, well, let's go get the best 17-year-olds on earth.
You just hope you're not developing them for somebody else too in today's world.
I know. That's right. You put all the work in, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Now, I'll say this, like Jamari Butler would have been an example of that because Nebraska developed Jamari for 3 years, but he's coming back. Ernest Hausman, who went to Michigan, he got some development, sure, but he's only been there 9 months. He's just really good. Like he's just a really good player.
But how about Sam? How about the irony of that situation? If Hausman, if Nebraska stays healthy at linebacker and Hausman doesn't play or plays less, he's probably on the team next year. Like he played just well enough that last month of the season to sort of recognize that there were greener pastures, especially in a program that is going through a big transition right now. And man, if I can't help but think that if Nebraska stays healthy there and he remains a backup, he's probably on the team.
Yep. I think Michigan probably saw him play against them, and he had a hell of a game at Michigan.
Right.
And they're like, oh, that's good. This guy's a good player. And he goes into the portal, and they're like, wow, he was a pretty good player. Yeah, that's He's gonna. I think he'll be a good player there. I think he'll fit in nicely. Wanted to ask this. So Nebraska's obviously in the market for a transfer quarterback. We know this because one has already visited, Jeff Sims from Georgia Tech, and two is Malik Hornsby, who could be a receiver but also wants to be a quarterback. He's coming in from Arkansas. And one of the reasons I think he left Arkansas is because their quarterback is returning as a starter there, and he wants to play. He just wants to be on the field. And I don't know that Arkansas is going to put him on the field regardless of what KJ Jefferson is doing or not doing. So here's the question. Nebraska's going back to a dual threat quarterback. You like it? One way or another, they're doing it.
Yeah, I do like it. But I don't know that much about the offense yet. I don't think any of us do right now. But I think they're going to get football players. You're going to get guys who can do a lot of things and who have a lot of talents, and they just want to play football. So, but yeah, I think a quarterback who can run. That doesn't mean they're going to run the option, but somebody who can drop back and take off is a big problem for a lot of defenses. What I'm wondering is, it's been me, sometimes I don't always I don't always see everything that happens, but have we heard anything out of Casey Thompson lately? Has he said anything?
He hasn't said anything publicly. He's had surgery.
What does that mean? I mean, is he's not going to the NFL? He said that. So is he?
There's a chance he could come back.
Here's my question: is there a chance that they may not want him? I mean, why wouldn't you want him? Right? He'd be
I wouldn't turn that opportunity down. I think you'd want him in.
I mean, because they have a lot of quarterbacks, right? And they're bringing some guys in. I just wonder if they're bringing people in right now. Does that mean they want to turn the page on Casey, or I don't know?
I think it's probably twofold. Like, the kid they're bringing in from Arkansas would be a backup.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd turn your offense over to him, but he also wants to play receiver. So he's a little bit different story. The kid from Georgia Tech, now he'd come in and probably want to start. He would.
I'd want to keep Casey, but I'm just saying, he hasn't transferred anywhere, right? He hasn't gone in the portal and left, so it's getting later for that to happen. I don't know. Maybe I just wonder what's going on there.
Sam, it's a trick question. Does dual threat mean Luke McCaffrey / Logan Smothers, or does dual threat mean Caleb Williams / Spencer Rattler? Those are not necessarily the same thing. So I think Nebraska needs to, you don't want to put yourself in position in today's college football where you get to 3rd and 12 and you don't have a chance because your quarterback can't throw a back shoulder fade. But on the other hand, I think a little bit more mobility back there, certainly helps, and it helps cover up some offensive line issues. If Nebraska can actually develop some depth, they'd probably be willing to move that quarterback around a little bit more. I don't think you'd want to do it if they had the depth issues that they had this past year. So I don't know. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, if dual threat encompasses a lot of quarterbacks these days, you just got to find a guy who has the right blend of the two. I mean, it's like I said, if you're putting a guy out there who, like McCaffrey a couple years ago, who can't make a simple throw, you're not gonna do very well. So hopefully, whoever they bring in is a pass first guy.
Well, I would say that the Arkansas guy, if he's going to be a full-time starting quarterback, he'll need to develop more. Be the way I would put that. I think he's got a lot of talent, but I think there's work to be done as a passer. Sims is decent. as a thrower. He completed about 58% of his passes career-wise. He really can run. So I'd encourage both. I don't know that it's going to be him, by the way. Indiana's an option for him, some other schools. You watch him run. There's a lot of Robert Griffin III there. There is. He can run, and he's really fast and looks a little bit like what you would hope Heinrich Haarberg would look like, to be very honest with you, if Haarberg ever got going in that offense. Long strider, sort of a sprinter-like runner. So what dual threat to me means is you're going to use your quarterback in the run game. And when you do that, certain things become true. One, you run for more yards. You almost always do. The minute that you add the quarterback to the run game, you're going to run for more yards because it's harder to defend. Two, you're going to have more fumbles. You're going to have potentially a lot more fumbles because quarterbacks are not running backs and they don't protect the ball that well. They just historically don't. And we can use Adrian Martinez, we can use whomever you want to underline that, but that's just a fact. Nebraska had 13 fumbles this year, right? They lost 6 of them. They had 13 fumbles and lost 6. Last year, they had 17 and lost 7. And that was with a running quarterback. Then you go back to the gem of 2020 when they only played 8 games and they had 22 fumbles and lost 9. In 2019, they had 27 fumbles and lost 12.
I was going to say, I just hope you keep going. Let's go all the way to about 2011, 2012. Let's just get crazy here.
The 2012 one is the famous one. They had 35 fumbles and lost 22. That's what happens when you run your quarterback. Now, people can say whatever the hell they want. And Matt Rhule can tell me, or can say, I can figure that out. But the empirical evidence in 2013, it was 32 fumbles and 16 lost. In 2014, it was 27 fumbles and 13 lost. They were last in the Big Ten in fumbles lost in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, not 2015. Guess what? In 2015, they went to the team with the least amount of fumbles in the Big Ten.
That's because they had a statue.
Well, Tommy Armstrong was still the quarterback in 2015.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were in 2017. Sorry.
In 2017, they only had 12 fumbles and they only lost 2.
This is fun.
So the point being that what happens is you start to have a shift in what your turnovers do. And you have to just keep it in mind. That's all I'm saying. Is when you go to that, you're going to run for more yards. You're going to be a more dangerous running offense. You'll probably be better in play action passing, but your team almost always will fumble the ball more. Almost always.
Well, they lost almost fumbles in 2012, and they won the division.
They won a lot of games. That's right.
Yeah, but they got lucky, Tom. Let's just call it what it is. They got lucky.
Hey, right now, I'll take lucky.
I get it.
What I've been watching.
Now, the flip side of the coin is if you look at this season, Oregon, which was a dual threat offense with Bo Nix, they only lost 3 fumbles. So there are some situations where it's different, where it doesn't turn out that way. I mean, I'm willing to concede that, but it just the exception's always in the room. Somebody always has an exception. But generally speaking, you're going to fumble the football more when your quarterback is more involved in the run game. So that'll just be something that we'll have to watch. Also, Jaden Daniels, who is now the quarterback at LSU, he fumbles everywhere he goes. They had 12 lost fumbles at Arizona State, and this year it was an astronomical number as well. And let's see, they lost 12 fumbles this year at LSU. They fumble the ball a lot when Jaden Daniels is your quarterback. That's a fun fact for people to know that is completely irrelevant to what we're talking about. Signing day is coming up next week. How has signing day changed, do you think, in the last 15 years, 20 years? Like, it's obviously not the same thing it used to be.
I think transfer portal is a bigger deal, especially it's a lot more fun to follow for people because it's guys who are going to play now. It's the Christmas present you can have now. It's not you don't have to wait for it. And what's the fun of recruiting when some of these guys are going to leave in a couple of years. You don't get to enjoy it. I mean, you get to enjoy it now, but I don't know. It's just the world's upside down right now because of the portal, and I don't mind that the signing date is less important. I don't mind that at all. But boy, the one in February is really become irrelevant, hasn't it? But I don't know, Sam. It's still important. It's still important to recruit. It just seems like there's more tension on the portal. Who can you get that can help you right now?
Sam, the way it used to be, signing day was the equivalent of the Major League Baseball draft. Now signing day is the equivalent of the NBA or NFL draft. You know, as Tom noted, you see guys sooner. You know, that to me, it's not just waiting on high school kids to develop. It's like you just said, you get excited about a guy and then he's gone. So I think National Signing Day has really lost its luster. I think it would benefit by moving to a different part of the calendar, you know, when it could get more attention and coaches could sort of separate transfer portal from high school recruiting day. So
yeah, I'd like to see him eliminate the December signing day, get rid of it, and go back to the one day. I think that would be better in my opinion. You know what one of my favorite signing day stories is, though? And Dirk, this will jog your memory because it's a quote from a story you wrote on signing day. And let's see if you remember who this was. You ready? They broke the guy code.
Oh, geez. I haven't heard that for a long time.
Who am I talking about?
Charles Jackson, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So 20, man, Sam, that was crazy. Okay. So I don't want to fall down a rabbit hole too far here, but this is the only signing day, I think maybe in Nebraska history where they didn't hold a press conference. And help me out if I get some of the details wrong.
They did it over the radio or something. They did it over.
It was a conference call.
Right.
So so we're sitting there like everybody's in their various places. It was sort of a precursor to the Zoom era, and everybody's on this teleconference with Bo Pelini in about 2012, and over the wires, Kevin Wilson, I think, right. He declares that one big piece of their signing day was he credited his new cornerbacks coach or something like that.
Well, he said his defensive backs coach Corey Raymond was going to Nebraska.
So he says Corey Raymond's going to Nebraska, and Nebraska already has a cornerbacks coach.
That's right, Marvin Sanders.
And so basically, Nebraska used Marvin Sanders to recruit, and then he was gone right after signing day. So of course, the natural journalist thing to do is to call the guy that Marvin Sanders recruited, which was Charles Jackson, and ask him what he thought about this and if he knew about this, that the guy who recruited him was no longer on the staff. And Charles Jackson said that Nebraska broke the guy code. So damage control was swift after that.
Wasn't it ever?
Bo Pelini was not happy with me one bit for calling the kid. And man, I had forgotten about that one.
And then his dad calls into a radio station or something. Like, it turned into a whole thing. That was one of my favorite signing day stories.
Was that 2012?
It was signing day 2011. So it was right after the 2010 season. Remember, they were going to get rid of all these coaches, but Bo, being Bo, dragged his feet on it. Didn't really want to figure out who it was going to be. That was the time when he didn't hire Scott Frost to be his coordinator. He dragged his feet, hired Rich Fisher, as his wide receivers coach.
Okay. So my other favorite memory, I think it might have been the year before. Oh, this one was even more ridiculous. Was when Nebraska advertised an offensive coordinator position because they had to post it to the university website while they still had an offensive coordinator. So Sean Watson was getting shoved out the door,
Yeah.
But Bo Pelini didn't want to quote fire him, and so they advertised for the position because they are legally obligated to do so before they made it known that Sean Watson was out of a job. So
That's right.
these little public relations nightmares, I'm sure were just a big hit, with the Nebraska Sports Information Office, but Bo didn't really care about any of that stuff.
The broke the guy code. That's a memorable one. No doubt about it. Okay. Let's move on to basketball.
Last thought.
Okay.
So I called Charles Jackson and he gave me that quote. And about 5 minutes later, I think Bo called him. And then so we write the story, and Bo's mad the next day because, I talked to Charles right after you talked to him, and we're fine now. And anyway. So
that was apoplectic, Bo. Let's move on to basketball. So they're 6-5 overall. I want to try to frame this in a context here. So I wrote a little thing for today. They're 6-5 overall. In order to make the NIT, they have to win 16 games, pretty much. That means they go 16-15 into the Big Ten tournament, and then they can lose a game there, be 500, and still be on the NIT bubble. Based on everything that you've seen, can this team win 10 more games?
Well, they're going to have a chance to, but I would never predict that. But they're going to have a better chance to do that than they have the last few years. Absolutely. But who's going to make shots? At some point in these conference games, somebody's going to make shots, and you can't just be all defense. So they've got to find that. But man, I love Derek Walker. I mean, give him the ball and let him go up, and he was making hook shots over the 7'4" guy last week. I mean, so he's fun to watch, obviously, and they're all fun to watch, and I think it'll be a lot more pleasant to watch. You won't have you won't have a repeat of the ugly Northwestern game last year where they came into Lincoln and they went up by 20 or the first 5 minutes, and everybody kind of quit. But so I think they have a better chance, Sam. But I mean, the Big Ten games they all look alike, but it's the teams that do better have a guy who's going to make shots at the end. So, who's that guy?
Sam, I hate to punt on my answer, but I just think this new Nebraska that we've all grown to appreciate. Tom went down and watched them last Saturday against Purdue, and we saw them against Creighton, and they're clearly more prepared for the grinding Big Ten games than they were a year ago. But man, I think we got to see more before we say that they're capable of winning 16 games. I mean, there are, at last check, there are 11 Big Ten teams in the top 44 in the country, according to Ken Pomeroy, who does these power rankings that all the coaches cite. 11 of the top 44 teams in the country are in the Big Ten. Now, I think that may be inflated a little bit. I'm not sure I buy that. I think the top of the league is, maybe not quite as good as it's been. But clearly there's a pretty, substantial middle to the league, where the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, for instance, are still probably NCAA tournament teams, and Nebraska's gotta compete with the Rutgers and the Wisconsins and the Marylands, the Iowas. They got to win games like that, especially on their home court. So I think it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. I think as Tom alluded to, I just don't know if there's enough offense on this team. To me, they look like a team that's going to lose a lot of games by 1 or 2 possessions, and I don't know if that'll cost Fred Hoiberg his job, because I don't think Nebraska wants to fire him this year. And if they can, show sort of progress, where you're losing by 6 instead of losing by 26, that might be enough to keep his job, but I don't think it's going to be enough to get him to the NIT.
I mean,
Nebraska's shooting 31.4% from three right now, and somewhere in the 60s at the free throw line. They won't do what they want to do if they keep shooting like that. So I wrote the thing that I wrote up. This is just going to be Sam Griesel, Emmanuel Bandamel, and Juwan Gary have taken 107 threes this season. Anybody want to guess how many of them they've hit out of 107?
107, you said?
Yeah.
26.
30. They've hit 30 of them out of 107. And that's pretty bad. That's 28%. And that's got to change. I mean, Bandamel has to hit them because Griesel doesn't really take them, and Juwan Gary won't be making them. And they probably ought to tell Juwan Gary to stop, but that's just my opinion. But if you look at since Derek Walker came back, because some people are like, well, Derek Walker came back, it'll get better. Well, they did hit 12 of 23 against Boston College, but in the last three games, they hit 25, 26.1, and 28.1 of their threes against Creighton, Indiana, and Purdue. And while it's true that those are all very good defensive teams, it's also similar to what they're going to face in the Big Ten. They're going to face more good defensive teams. Nebraska's got to find a way to get to 35% from three in league play. And they have not touched that number in a very, very long time. The best they had, I think, over the course of a year in the last decade was 34.6. Well, maybe they got there with the Andrew White season. That 1 year Andrew White was here. He hit a 43 or 44% of his threes and might have lifted everybody up. But this is a program that has historically had a real issue with making shots. And the one thing I thought Fred Hoiberg would do that he hasn't done is bring in shooters.
Well, they clearly sacrificed that type of player when they went out and got, Gary, Bandamel, and Griesel. I mean, they I don't want to say they gave up on scoring, but they kind of gave up on scoring. They decided they were going to try to win games, 61-58. And I don't want to criticize them for that decision because I think it's given them a chance. And I think they're just going to have to compromise offense in the process. But like I said, it reminds me of some of those Miles teams that were just close, and couldn't win games in the last 5 minutes. So I think it's probably a little too early to make conclusions about what they're going to be. But I think Tom would agree with this. The biggest thing right now is they're fun to watch again. They play hard, and I don't want to say that's enough or that should be enough, but man, after the last few years, like that's major progress. So I'll continue to look at it, glass half full until proven otherwise. But I appreciate how hard they're playing and how well they defend. And if they're going to play as well as they did against Purdue, even despite the offensive struggles, they'll be in almost every game.
They've got 10 home games left, and 9 of them are against the Big Ten. NIT would be it's almost pie in the sky right now for this program. But can they defend home court? How many of those home games can they win? I think that would be a big win. I mean, this may not be impressive to some fans out there. They think this is probably kind of lame, but I think you got to start somewhere, and clearly they have the kind of style that is going to play to the crowd, and I think is going to get people excited. Not let it fly or shoot threes and fast break, but just play grind it out is going to get people excited. How many home games can they win? There was a week in January where they've got Illinois, Ohio State, and Northwestern right in a row at home. Can they take 2 of those 3? Could they possibly win all 3? I mean, that's a lot to ask, but after watching Illinois against Penn State, I mean, everybody's gonna have a bad day. And maybe Nebraska can help force people to have a bad day. I don't know. But I think home court is where it starts for this season, and 10 home games left. if you win half of those, that's 5 more. You're at 11. Maybe you get more than 5. I don't know.
Yeah, Tom. I mean, I think I was thinking more like 7 or 8. I think Nebraska's got to find a way to win
Yeah.
7 or 8 of those, and I think that's very reasonable, to be honest. They're gonna get a few clunkers that come into Lincoln. I mean, I don't think they should be able to beat Northwestern and Lincoln. They should be able to beat, Penn State is weak enough to lose in Lincoln. But you should beat Minnesota and Lincoln. So I think they can win 7. And at that point, it just becomes, hey, can you steal a couple somewhere else? So I just defense travels. Defense always travels. Nebraska has really shown an aptitude and a sort of a tenacity on that end of the court. So I give them a chance. I think they're probably one shot maker away from being a postseason team.
That's where Saturday's game could have been so big. At some point, can you establish an identity at home where you get a little home mojo? When you're playing at home, the crowd knows you're going to be in it. They come prepared. You come prepared to it's just something going on when you're at home. There's an identity there that the teams that are coming in are maybe a little nervous. Imagine that going to Nebraska being nervous. I'm just saying that's to me what they need to establish here. You've got a home, start with the home court. See if you can start winning some games there, and then you never know how many more you might win. I mean, it's crazy, but Sam, I still want to know more about the guy code. What is the guy code? I mean, what's the rest of the guy code? I've lived all these years. I didn't know about the guy code.
I think Charles Jackson was saying that they should have told him they were going to fire Marvin Sanders before he signed that morning versus waiting until he is signed and then having Kevin Wilson announce who Nebraska's new defensive backs coach was going to be.
I just hope Charles told Bo to his ear that about the guy code. That would have been good.
I just imagine how he, and my understanding of that story, Dirk, is that's the angriest Bo has ever been at you.
Oh, I mean, there's I don't know about that.
Okay, other than the 2011 Ohio State game. Other than that, though, that
No, the weird part, Sam, is, and I hate to belabor stuff that people have already, this is over and done with, but he almost never expressed anger to me. I think he expressed anger at the World-Herald to Tom. I think he did it, to Thad, to you sometimes, but he never really did it to me. I think he did it to our old publisher. I think they had a lot of conversations, but he very rarely actually expressed his anger directly toward me or you or Niatawa. I mean, it was always to somebody else.
Don't you miss it a little? Don't you miss Nebraska being relevant in that way, though? Matt Rhule is not like Bo, but man, I hope there comes back this sense of that the games matter more than they have. It feels like we've spent a lot of time sort of excavating why it fails. And if there's one thing that was really kind of a downer about the Scott era is he didn't even seem excited about it. It was his lack of enthusiasm for what was going on, trickled into everyone else's lack of enthusiasm.
Yeah, no, I think that's the better point. Is it's not so much missing Pelini. I think back to that 2012 season, for instance. All right, and Nebraska, winning on the road at Northwestern, winning on the road at Michigan State, beating when they win 6 or 7 in a row to end the year, and they're just every Saturday. And it is true when they lost too, when they gave up 70 points. I mean, every Saturday just had a weight to it. and it wasn't specific to the Pelini era. It was still true even in the Callahan era. You know, 2007, those until it absolutely fell apart. 2006, I mean, those games had a weight to them where it felt big, it felt significant. It sort of defined people's weekend in a way that it doesn't really do anymore. I miss that. I think that changed in the Riley era to some degree, and then especially obviously in the Scott era. I mean, Nebraska lost 10 football games in a row. Who would have ever imagined that? But I think I don't miss specific individuals. I just miss the significance of every of those games, and even the big ones don't feel big anymore, right? Like, you know, the Oklahoma game, that wasn't a big deal, really. I mean, it's obviously it was on the heels of firing Scott Frost, but man, when Nebraska scheduled that game, however long ago, you know, that should have been the defining game of the season. That should have been something that generated, you know, enormous excitement and anticipation. And it just doesn't really do that anymore. And you see it obviously in the way, you know, we think about it. You especially see it in the way that our kids and grandkids think about it. So it's just kind of sad to see it slip.
Yeah, I think Rhule can bring that back to some degree. I do. Even if they don't win all the time, I think Matt Rhule is going to be enough of a presence and enough of a figure in ways that, you know, Frost just wasn't. Frost didn't always seem all that interested in his own job. And I think Rhule will be intensely interested. I think he'll be, you know, pretty detailed and yeah. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. Okay, the next time we will be back is probably next week after signing day when we recap whatever it is that Nebraska finishes with. My hunch is it'll be around 20 high school and junior college commits, and then, you know, whatever they're able to get in the transfer portal by then. But more importantly, we'll hear from Matt Rhule by then, and maybe we'll have something from the assistants too. I think that's still up in the air. I think last year we did hear from the assistants on the same day as signing day. Maybe that'll happen this year, maybe it won't. But I do think we'll hear certainly from Rhule, and he'll be pretty engaged and fired up to talk to us, I'm sure. Okay, so
Sam, can I ask you one question? Just philosophically, Kate, and I'm not talking about any specific players, but philosophically, why would you recruit JUCO players right now if you're Matt Rhule?
Well, because sometimes JUCO players, like the kid they just got from California, he's 1 year out of high school, and he went to a junior college basically to improve his recruiting profile. And he got a whole year worth of football. Like he got to play a year's worth of football. It's American River Community College. And so he's going to come to Nebraska more developed than he probably would have been if he had come here last year and then just kind of played on the practice squad. So
yeah, it's a prep school experience. I just think, yes. I look at the program right now, and there's this constant tension between, are you going to let it bottom out or not? You know, are you gonna go get transfers? Are you gonna keep Casey Thompson and try to win next year? Are you know? There's just all sorts of examples of it where, to what degree does Nebraska embrace starting over? And
you'd like them to just bottom out, right? Like you would be okay with that. You'd be okay with them going just completely starting over and rebuilding the thing without having to try to impress anybody or pretend that, you know, we can win right away. You'd rather they just blew it up.
Well, I don't want to say I would rather do that, because that would indicate that I want to watch a 1-11 season. But that's what they did. That's what he did. You know, his first couple of years at Temple and then at Baylor, and you know, it worked for him. So I would be surprised if he wouldn't embrace that concept again.
I think this place is different. I think it's more challenging in the sense that people here really struggle to lose games. And there's also a sellout streak that there does become a point where the sellout streak becomes not a believable event. And so you're not going to try to pretend anymore. Trev Alberts has taken the price down for next year by $100. That's an honest, good faith effort. Appreciate that. They're going to sell more tickets that way, and they need to. And simultaneously, you just don't want to watch losing football anymore. Like Rhule has been tasked to come in and win some games because people around here are getting pretty jaded. And somewhere along the way, you've got to try to make good on that. So I don't know.
What I think Dirk said was great about the Oklahoma game. I didn't, as an old Oklahoma Nebraska fan, I didn't even really have that much fun that week because I knew the game wasn't going to be probably any good. So I think there's a generation that obviously don't know, and I tell people who say, "Well, it'll never be back. It'll never be the same. It'll never be this or that." I said, you forget what it was. People my age, especially, don't remember what it was like when they were in every game and they were going to win. And it's when this thing wins, everything in this state is different. It's better. Day-to-day life is better. Everything is just. It's hard to describe, but. Yes, it can be the same. You could have kids in all the schools wearing Nebraska gear again. Absolutely, you could. It'll never be what it was, but I'm looking forward to a generation of people who don't know finding out for the first time what it's like, and that I think that'll be exciting. Now, to what level? I'm not. I don't think it'll ever be 9 or 10 a year ever again. But 7 or 8 going to bowl games, that'll be like going from the black and white TV to the color TV to the Wizard of Oz when it becomes color. People will go, "Whoa, what is this? I don't remember any of this." So, I think that is what I think Matt Rhule can help bring back. Well, I agree. There's something about a football gym rat. I people will embrace it if he lets people see that side of him. It'll mean more. I think if he shows that it means a lot to him. So, on that note, I do have a Bo Pelini story I'd like to share.
Yes, by all means.
And I don't think I've written about this. I've told the story a few times at different outings where I speak. But this was after one of the Orlando Bowls where they had the Hail Mary. I think it was at the end of the first half. And after the game, they lose the game to South Carolina. And after the game, Bo was blaming the Hail Mary. Well, we coached them. They didn't execute it. They knew how to defend it, but they didn't execute it. So I wrote, well, he kind of threw his players under the bus there. He always said he'd never do that, but he wasn't really taking blame for it. Blah blah blah. So 2 or 3 weeks later, I'm driving around Omaha. My phone rings. It says Bo Pelini on the thing. I answer it. Yeah, Bo. And he goes, Tom. He goes, I did. Somebody told me you wrote this. I didn't read it. Of course, they never actually read it, right? Somebody always tells them what somebody wrote, right? Whatever. But yeah, you said I threw my guys under the bus. Well, you know me better than that. I would never do that. So we talked a little bit. All of a sudden, he started getting really angry, and because I wasn't giving in, and so. He started yelling at me, and it became louder and louder. And there were words that I thought I heard because he turned into this Jerry Faust hoarse voice. This thing I couldn't even understand what he was saying, and it just became louder and louder. And so I said, "Bo, if you want to have an adult conversation about this, I'd be happy to." And I hung up on him. I hung up on the head coach because why not? He was screaming. I couldn't understand what he was saying. So I drive in like a Hy-Vee. I go in and I get my honey-do list, whatever done. Come on, 15 minutes later, there's 10 phone calls from him on my phone, and he calls again, and I'm like looking at it. I guess, should I answer or not? Oh, I'll answer. The poor guy. So I answer it. Yeah, Bo. He goes, Tom, I'm so sorry I did that. I didn't. I really, I don't know what happened. I just don't know. And so I said, "Oh, it's okay. So let's talk." And so we talked for about 40 minutes. I probably sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes talking to him about the state of the program, direction, things he wanted to do, and all that stuff. But to me, that'll always be Bo Pelini. 1 minute screaming, cussing me out. 5 minutes later, calm. It's all good. I apologize, so on and so forth. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. I would never say what people might think that is, but to me, that was Bo Pelini.
Yeah, he wasn't an elitist. He was an equal opportunity person when it came to conversations. You have to admit, he was willing. He was willing to call you a lot of names, and he was willing to have a dialogue with you. And a lot of times, journalists will take that over the person who never seems to have any time and is always a little too good for you. With that note, we will end this week's Pick Six podcast. We'll be back next week to talk about recruiting. For Dirk, for Tom, I'm Stan. Thanks, Husky.